Shabbat Shalom. And now for a special blessing, I'll introduce to you our great brother, Abelin Hawkins.
Please be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's an honor to stand before you today, great saints of Yahweh. I feel so humbled. I've traveled over 6,500 miles to be here at the great House of Yahweh. To keep Passover Feast of Unleavened Bread. I started studying with the House of Yahweh some 11 years ago. That was in 2001. And for 11 years, I had my eyes set on coming to Abelin, to the House of Yahweh. And Yahweh has just opened that door. Today I'm going to be speaking on bringing Yisrayl Hawkins to Nigeria, the work of the peaceful solution. There are thousands of other brethren over there in Nigeria, all over Africa, thousands in Africa wanting to get baptized, wanting to be at the feast of Yahweh, but somehow they've not been able to make it because of the stringent visa approval systems put in place by government. But we pray that very soon now, Yahweh opens the door for them all to be able to come. And many of these people are sitting around computers right now watching this service. And I say to all of them, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Ghana, Zimbabwe, Namibia, wherever you may be in Africa, that it can be done. I'm here right now at the House of Yahweh rejoicing at this feast. And I know you can too. We have to keep working, we have to keep praying, and we will get here. This is where we belong. In Nigeria, for example, we've always, been so excited about being a part of Yahweh's work, trying to do our best to see to it that we, are part of this work, by paying our tithes, by being there at the other end when the Skype classes are going to take place, when the priests get to teach us over Skype. We connect via Ustream to live services. And it's a blessing, really, to be taught directly from Abel, though we were not able to come at the time. And we waited for Yahweh to, make a way for us to be able to come to his feast. And all the time we were waiting, we didn't just want to sit idle. We were going to do something about the peaceful solution also. We were going to bring forth Yisrayl Hawkins to Nigeria. And we found a peaceful solution to be user-friendly, to be ready to go, that anybody could teach it. So we wanted seriously to start. And like Nora, we wanted to cry out, like the bray of the donkey, to bring forth Yisrayl Hawkins in our country. But before we could do anything, we had to check first at Abel. As we will read from 2 Samuel 20, verse 18, you'll find on page 268 in the book of Yahweh. So then she spoke, saying, they used to speak long ago, saying, to receive an answer, ask at Abel, and that will settle a matter. It would be futile, wasting precious time, trying to reinvent the wheel, because we had the priest over here to guide us. And checking with Abel all the time helped us to overcome many challenges, to avoid many pitfalls that were on the way. So under the guidance of the priest, we set up the Foundation for Positive Character Development in Nigeria for the sole purpose of propagating the peaceful solution in Nigeria. Before we could go out to promote the peaceful solution, of course, we had to get some training. The Kohans advised that we must have all the concepts at our fingertips. So we got into training right away. We were in training for 3 months, trying to familiarize ourselves with everything the peaceful solution had to presented. And we were trying to make ourselves competent enough to be able to teach this to the world, to be able to cry out like the donkey. Like we see in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, so on page 938, which says, study to show yourself approved to Yahweh, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, the law and the prophets. So right after our training, we were supposed to go out, right? But somehow we developed cold feet. We were, nervous. We couldn't get started. And again, the co-hands came in, encouraged us to summon the courage it needed. We just had to get out there and start doing something. And we did. At the end of the training period, the first place we went was the Nigerian Prison Service. We went to the Zone A. Zone A covers about 6 states out of the 36 states we had in Nigeria. And when we got there, we spoke with the most senior officers there. They accepted the peaceful solution. They liked the idea. And they wanted us to come and train about 25 of their officers. And we agreed to do that. But there was a problem. And the problem was when Nigerian government officials go out to attend training programs, usually they're paid allowances by the government. And they told us that this was not in their budget, and so they weren't going to get the money to pay them. If we could pay them, we said, wow, how could we get the money? So we contacted the priests at Abelin, and they said, nope, you can't be paying them to come and learn the peaceful solution. In any case, it sounded like bribe the way they were talking about it. So we said we couldn't do that. So we were a little bit dejected, that the first attempt was kind of stalling. Of course, we had to get with the priest again, and we asked, what do we do? And they said, well, you can't look back. If you try and they don't accept it, you have to keep trying. You have to keep working hard. And I remember one of the priests quoted from Luke chapter 9, verse 62, and I'll read that very quickly. It says, and Yeshua said unto him, no man who puts his hand to the plow, then looks back, is fit for the kingdom of Yahweh. So we knew we had to look ahead. And we began to think, what do we do, to get around this problem? And what we did immediately was to write to the headquarters of the Nigerian prisons, nationwide. We wrote to them, not knowing what was going to come out of it, but they invited us. They asked us to come and talk to them about the peaceful solution. So we met with the Controller General of Nigerian prisons, in the whole of Nigeria, at the federal capital in Abuja. We met with him, and he delegated, a number of his staffs, senior staffs also, to sit with us so we could work out ways that we could use the peaceful solution in the Nigerian prison system. So we got to work right away. We agreed with them. If we see video 1 right now, so, video 1, please. We agreed with them right away that we were going to start with a pilot program at the Boston Institution in Ilorin, Kwara State. The Boston Institution is a detention facility for boys. Yes, that was in Lagos, where we went to the Zone A of the Nigerian prisons. That was the first attempt. We were speaking there with the most senior officer, and we had a group photograph after the presentation, and they told us they were going to get us 25 people who will become instructors of the peaceful solution. But when that didn't work out, we went to Abuja. With us there are most senior officers there in Abuja, at the Federal Capital Territory, where I'm speaking about right now. So in Abuja, they told us that they were going to use the program, but we will start with the detention facility for boys. We will use that as a pilot program, and they asked us to go on an inspection tour, at that facility in Kwara State. So we went, we saw the place, and we wrote our recommendations. The recommendations was to the effect that the Nigerian prison system did not have any form of character building. So because of that, we asked them to implement a peaceful solution right away, which they did. They told us that we were going to start working with the peaceful solution right away, but that we had to wait for the budget. And that was what kind of slowed us down a bit, because each time they were expecting the federal government to release enough funds to do the program, but somehow they weren't getting enough funds, so that kind of slowed us down a bit. But while we were waiting for them to get ready for us, since they accepted the entire program, we started teaching at local schools, training the teachers in local schools in Lagos. And we went to quite a number of schools. The first place we went was a group of 5 schools. We had the opportunity to speak, we were the keynote speakers at their graduation ceremony, and we had the opportunity of teaching self-control to everyone who was present. And at the end of that presentation, not only the students benefited, but also the invited guests, because there was a woman who was in the audience, a wealthy businesswoman, who immediately gave us her card and told us we had to come to her company. We had to train some of our staff in the peaceful solution. And we did that. We went to the place, we trained her staff, and she told us she had another branch in Abuja, and we had to go there also to train the staff. And that was how we really got out, teaching the peaceful solution. And shortly after that, we got another invitation from a vocational training institute for, disabled people. And the women were the ones who went to that place, and they did a wonderful job teaching acceptance to the people there. Yeah, the parents of the disabled people, as well as the disabled people themselves, benefited quite well from the acceptance. But that was just, at the beginning. So gradually, we were, kind of getting used to going out to teach the peaceful solution. We were, feeling more confident every time. So we were asked by the priest again to try to see the minister for education in our country. The minister, that's usually a very difficult thing to do. But we wrote to the minister, all right, requesting permission to see the minister. But we didn't stop there. We also wrote to the president of the country. We wrote to the Senate president, Congress people, and so on. We also wrote to the governor of Lagos State and the deputy governor of Lagos State. Lagos State is where we're based in Nigeria. The letter to the deputy governor of Lagos State yielded fruit. We got a call from the office of the deputy governor, and they told us to go to a teachers' establishment and pensions office, and that our letter was there, and that they will, we will have dealings with them. So we went to the place. And when we got to the place, we had the opportunity, after speaking with them, to train 150 secondary school teachers. That's high school teachers. We'll see that in video 2. Video 2, please. So we were able to train 150 school teachers. It was a very successful outing. That's me in that video. Because we had 150 people, and we didn't have a large hall. So what they did was to give us 3 lecture rooms. So we had to, split into 3 groups. So once I finished from one class, I hopped into the next one, and another person came and took over from the class I was. It was pretty hectic, but it was fun, because finally we were getting to do what we wanted to do. So the work with them is still ongoing anyway, because we are still yet to train about 300 school principals, because that is upcoming. And the picture you see there, that's where we replicate the peaceful solution books to try and get it out to people. Because we've done hundreds of them so far, and we've taken them to different places. So that's a group photograph with the women, with some of the teachers, and the men also. So we also had the opportunity to teach at a rehabilitation center where they had serious problems with drug use, they had serious problems with violence, and so on and so forth. And they didn't know how to deal with it. They just contained all these people. They didn't know how to change them, to turn their lives around. But somehow we stumbled on them, and we presented a peace solution to them. Immediately they asked us to start classes with these people, and we actually started classes with them. Right now we're working with that institute to train volunteers that they've recommended, that they've handpicked, who will eventually become peaceful solution instructors. And they've acquired some of the books themselves to use in their projects. So the peaceful solution is going to be the only character building tool that's the only tool they have anyway. That was the only tool we were able to give them, and that was the only thing they ever got. Was so then Yahweh opened a very big door for us, which is very recently. And that was, we stumbled on a newspaper article where the wife of the president of Nigeria was speaking about, the necessity for teaching peace education in schools. She was saying this at a forum for African First Ladies Peace Mission. You know, all wives of presidents all over Africa, they have this body, African First Ladies Peace Forum. And when we saw that in the paper, that they wanted to teach peace education, there's only one peace education system we know, and that's the Peace Solution. So we wrote to them immediately and, you know, sent somebody to Abuja to deliver the letter and the information packet. We had quite a bunch of stuff to give them. We had handbills and so on. A lot of information we got from the priest, and a lot of information we also got from the Peace Solution website. The website is really very rich. So we got all of that and sent it to Abuja. And while our man was there trying to, he submitted the letter, got a clearment copy, he was also supposed to see the protocol officer in order to see if we could arrange a meeting with the First Lady. That was proving a bit difficult. Then somebody gave him a hint that the First Lady had an NGO, a non-governmental organization somewhere in Abuja, and if he could go there, it would be a lot easier for us. So he rushed to the place immediately. And when he got to the place, it turned out it was the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution that is the think tank for the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Nigeria. And that institute actually is serving, because the First Lady of Nigeria is currently the president of the African First Ladies Peace Mission. So she's going to be president for the next 2 years. And that institute is serving as an operational base for now. So she's going to be operating from there. So when he discussed with the director of internal conflict resolution and prevention, he jumped at the opportunity. It was as if they've been waiting for us all along. So we, discussed with them, sent them all the information they needed, and they said they were going to invite us. And within 2 weeks, they invited us, which is the video you're seeing right now. That's the Director General of the Institute, Dr. Joseph Gowa. I was hard difficult pronouncing his name. Dr. Joseph Gowa. And there are many other senior members of staff who were sitting down there, directors and so on. That's Dr. Jonathan D. Issa. That's the Director of Finance of the Institute. And to his left, that's Dr. Bakut Bakut. So doctors and professors are sitting around and listening to us. Okies, teaching them the peaceful solution. So at the end of the discussion, they told us this was what they've been looking for, and that we need to have other meetings to be able to, articulate our positions and see how we could really work together. So within 3 weeks, they asked us to come again. But this time around, they were going to pay our flight tickets. They paid for our flight tickets, paid hotel bills, paid everything, and even gave us money, honoraria, for coming to teach. So we were being paid to teach the peaceful solution. So by the time we got there the second time, and we showed them everything that the peaceful solution had, to offer them, we trained about 50 members of their staff on the second visit. These 50 people were going to become, instructors of the peaceful solution themselves. Because at the meeting, because the first day we had the training for their staff, the second day we had a meeting with them where we had to work out all the details on how we will cooperate. Because right now they were addressing us as consultants, and we were supposed to help them to. They've been waiting for this, and that's the picture of when we were telling them about Yisrayl Hawkins there. So they told us that they were already working with the Federal Ministry of Information, Federal Ministry of Education. They were working already with National Orientation Agency, as well as the Foreign Affairs Ministry. So we suddenly realized this was the key we wanted to unlock the doors to all the organs of government we've been trying to get into all along. So the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, after the meeting with them, we decided to do 4 things, actually. And the 4 things is that the first was the peace solution books. They wanted them to be in use in Nigerian schools, and they were going to push that. And they wanted us to, include Nigerian examples, where you use an example of something that occurred in Texas or in California. Maybe you could use an example of something that occurred in Lagos or in Kaduna, So we called the priest immediately right in the middle of the meeting, and they said, yes. I spoke with pastor, and I said, oh, yeah, that can be done. So, and work is ongoing on that right now. Then we suggested to them on our first meeting that we could also have peace clubs peace clubs in all of the schools in the country, where members of the club will become models, will become examples in righteousness to all other students in the school, where they'll use the peace solution exclusively. They bought the idea and they said, we're going to work on establishing peace clubs all over the country, but we're going to start with the Federal Capital Territory. And the big one, they said, we are going to work towards putting in the peace solution in the curriculum of high schools all over Nigeria. Praise Yahweh. And there is a government agency that sits on, decides what goes into the curriculum and what goes out of it. They meet once a year. That's the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council. And they told us we shouldn't worry. They're a federal government agency, so they have the wherewithal. So they said we should get everything ready because they're going to sit between May and June so that we can have it presented to them during that period. So we're going to have everything. Work is ongoing right now with the priest to see to it that we're able to meet the target, so that we'll present to them and push for inclusion into the curriculum of secondary schools. And once that is done, then we know we're really starting to work hard. Then finally, we're already working on training teachers like we were doing in Lagos State. That is when one of members of the Peace Solution was presenting something to the Director General at the end of the first meeting with them. So in the training of teachers, they offered to partner with us, because right now we're working with Lagos State, and we're thinking of taking it to other states too, but that's going to be a little difficult. It's not going to be as fast. But right now they want to work with us, because they told us to do a memo that as soon as I come back, because I told them I was coming to the States, and so as soon as I return to Nigeria, I should do a memo to them, inviting them to partner with us on that. Then we'll write joint letters to the state governments so that we can start the training of teachers all over the country. Of course, we'll do it systematically. So that's the second one. Then I began to worry, when all of these things was unfolding, I was thinking maybe at the end of the day they're going to ask us for money again or something, But when we spoke about funding, this is what they said. They said they intend to use their contacts with donor agencies. They've worked with UNDP, United Nations Development Project. They've worked with UNICEF and UNESCO in the past. And they said they're going to use, the usual channels they use in getting funding from donor agencies, that they will get the funding that is necessary for the project. And what it seemed to me was like they've been thinking of something like this, but they just didn't know how to get started. So when we came along, we came just at the right time, and they found this irresistible. Right now, all of those people, if you mention Israel Hawkins, there's none of them who will tell you they don't know him, because that's that's the first name they get to hear. In fact, the presentations we do, the first 4 or 5 slides tell them who Yisrayl Hawkins is and how he came about the peaceful solution and all of that. So, in conclusion, right now we're having more work than we can handle in Nigeria. Thanks to the priests. But I'm going to go back, and the work continues, because the priest told me one time that the reward for work, is more work. When you work and you have some successes, what you get as a reward is more work. So I'm getting prepared for more work, actually. And I want to say to all the brethren back in Africa, in other parts of the world also, that just because you're not able to come to the House of Yahweh at this time does not mean you cannot be part of the work. That we can all bring forth Yisrayl Hawkins in our countries. We can all pay our tithes. We can be there, to be taught over Skype. We must, of course, before we do anything, we have to get in touch with the priest to get permission. But we can all get involved with the peaceful solution. We can help to push this to the ends of the earth as it is. So, whatever we do anyway, it has to be under the direction of the priest. In our case, as a matter of fact, when we started, we didn't have a clue as to how to go about it. We just knew we wanted to do this. And of course, the most sensible thing to do would be to ask those who have done it, who've been going out to teach. And we benefited quite a lot from all the interactions we had with them, because they shared with us the experience in teaching the peaceful solution here in America, some of the things we were to expect. They told us where all the pitfalls were. So it was kind of easy to navigate, because this time around we weren't just walking on our own. We were being led, as it were. And it worked. It always works if we turn to the priest. I'd like us to turn quickly to Deuteronomy 17, verse 9 to 10, which seems to underscore this point. Deuteronomy 17, verse 9 to 10, which asks us to go to the priests who are Levites and to the judge who is in office at that time, ask for their decision, and they'll give you the sentence of judgment. You must act according to the sentence they pronounce for you at the place Yahweh chooses. Be careful to do all that they order you to do. That is the important thing. And once we do that, everything is just going to work fine. So I want to encourage everyone who's listening to this, wherever you may be on the face of the earth, that this is the time to get to work. It is time to be part of history. It is time to get with the House of Yahweh and to do what we can to be a part of this work. And with that, I turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We're seeing prophecy being fulfilled before our very eyes, and not only here, but also around the world with the news that's going on. And we have a few short news stories this morning. One of them is the earthquake that was 8.6, and there was actually 4 earthquakes, I think, in that day, or within 48 hours. Another one was like a 6.9 off of the Gulf of California. But we also have the missile launch that the North Koreans did, and they're calling the North Koreans, and they're calling the Syrians, and they're calling the Iranians defiant. This is their new word. But it's just another word. It's the new heretical. This is what this is. They're going against the Catholic Church. And keep in mind that one of the things that South Korea does with North Korea is they'll set up around Christmas time a gigantic Christmas tree that's visible across the border just to aggravate them. And they literally, the North Koreans say they're trying to convert their people into Christianity. So it is a religious war that's going on here. The news media does not cover this fact, and they ignore it, but they set up the giant tree and they light it with lights, and they say they're not only trying to convert their people to Christianity, they're also trying to gloat about the fact that they have electricity, because they've cut off North Korea, with these sanctions that are killing thousands of men, women, and children every year, because they cut them off from the economic aid, and people are literally starving to death in that country because of what the forces of the Catholic Church are doing. And then we have Syria, which has got this peace treaty, which is not going to last. They've got a little bit of a truce, and basically what they're talking about is how it is not going to last, and that this fighting is going to start back up. They want to get rid of Assad, and the ones that want to get rid of him are the Catholics that come from this university that's in France, that is a crusading university that goes back hundreds of years, and the men that are in charge of this, if you research into them, you'll find out that they're actually Catholic priests. So that's really what's going on here. It's totally religious, and so let's play the film.
Pay close attention. What you're seeing today is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy. Katan, we have a major earthquake to talk about this week. We see North Korea test firing a long-range missile, and we see the continual unrest in Syria.
That's right, Jeff, but we're going to start off this week with an earthquake that struck off the coast of Sumatra. But not just a tiny earthquake, an 8.6 magnitude earthquake. Now, this was followed by an 8.2 magnitude aftershock. Warnings quickly followed of a possible tsunami because of early detection systems recently in place. Now, these systems came after an earlier, deadlier quake that hit on December 26th of 2004.
And that was the one that almost killed 250,000 people.
That's right. And it also generated waves upwards of 100 feet in height.
Now, fears were calmed after the tsunami warnings were dropped. What made this quake different from the one in 2004 was the shifting of the plates horizontal instead of vertical. In 2004, the sudden upthrust caused the shock wave that produced a massive tsunami. This time, the plates slid sideways instead of ramming into one another. Therefore, the warnings and fears were quickly dropped.
Now, moving on eastward to North Korea, the North Korean government surprised the United States and other nations with an unannounced missile launch last Friday. The long-range missile was detected by U.S. radar and satellites. North Korea said its aim was to put an Earth observation satellite in space that would monitor crops and forests.
As reported by CBS correspondent David Martin, the three-stage rocket was supposed to follow a flight path that would travel due south, a trajectory that would not threaten the U.S. in any way. Its stages would splash down an open ocean, while the satellite, whose Korean name means bright star, should be propelled into polar orbit.
Of course, the U.S. is using its Navy and radar to track the rocket's flight. Now, while this is a non-threatening launch, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton referred to this launch as a test to see if the missile could handle a nuclear warhead. She said there's no doubt that this satellite would be launched using ballistic missile technology.
In response to this launch, Clinton also said that a deal that would have sent food aid to North Korea will be canceled. The U.S. expects a possible underground nuclear test in response to this, as they have detected tunneling in a remote area of North Korea.
Wow. And they're going to punish the people by not giving them food because of what the government's doing. Amazing. Now, it's evident the North Korean peninsula will remain in a tense situation with this tit-for-tat going on between them and the United States.
Syria is calling for a ceasefire, and so far, the majority of the gunshots have stopped. This is the first break since the president, Bashar al-Assad, set out to squash a freedom movement that began over a year ago. Former head of the UN, Kofi Annan, has said that Assad has not fulfilled all the terms of the truce that Annan had negotiated with him.
As one CBS reporter was quoted as saying, 3 miles from the center of Damascus, the ceasefire was holding, but the army had not pulled back as they had promised to do. Although the Syrian government had refused filming, undercover footage showed tanks within the city and checkpoints every couple blocks. Outside Damascus, in homes in Hama, in areas of resistance, videos showed equally heavy military presence, in violation, of course, of the agreement.
The government says they have pulled back, but Syrian's foreign minister spokesman refused to say when the rest would follow. Protesters refuse to believe that Syrian government will uphold the ceasefire agreement and are determined to demonstrate, showing their determination to oust their current president.
Now, during the past year, tens of thousands of people protested, demanding more freedom and political change. Soon after came the crackdown by the Syrian government. This resulted in thousands of deaths on both sides. Syrian foreign minister concluded by saying dialogue and reconciliation are the only ways out.
Many protesters say they will negotiate as long as the negotiations lead to President Assad stepping down. Some believe the Syrian government will not agree to those conditions, which leave the prospects for an agreement and any type of peace very slim.
Well, those prospects are going to remain slim, Jeff, until these nations decide to find a peaceful solution as taught by Yisrayl Hawkins and then start to put it to work within their own governments and throughout their nations. Until then, they're going to bring themselves to the brink of destruction where they're going to wipe out 4/5 of mankind over the face of the whole earth.
Well, stay tuned to hear Yisrayl Hawkins give you the solutions to all these problems and many more as he explains Bible prophecy. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for joining us.
Everyone please stand. The greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins!
Oh, what a beautiful sight. You may be seated. You've been at this for 6 days and you're still cheering. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I hope you've been praising Yahweh for the wonderful feast and the wonderful weather and the love and rejoicing that we're seeing, still seeing it. That it's a beautiful thing. You know, in reading the news articles, skipping over them a while ago, what we saw at Yeshua's memorial, and then, of course, throughout the first part of the feast, and we're still bringing it forth, is the difference in the kingdoms. You know, the Nimrod system that was set up in Genesis 10, it was to rule by force. And of course, that system is set up as a tyrant. And of course, they have their laws, and their laws are geared to bring in money, force people to pay them money. And whereas if they step out of line, it puts them in jail and made slave labor out of them, took their land, possessed their lands, and so forth. This was all done by force. Yeshua, in calling his disciples to him, when they were wanting to know who would be the greatest, he said, you know, this Nimrod system, it's set up to rule by force. But he said, you can't be this way. And he said, in Yahweh's kingdom, the greatest ones are those that's going to be like Noah. But that's the difference in the two kingdoms that we see in the world today. Today's 4/13/2012, last day of the feast. I looked that up this morning just just to see what that number meant, because that number in Scripture by H.L. Bullinger, I don't know if anyone read that book. It's boring, but there's a lot of great information showing that every word and letter and phrase is numbered, and it runs by numbers and coded with numbers. But anyway, the number for today, the meaning of it is motion towards, denoting motion towards Yahweh, of course. Near, and we know that Yahweh is near us now because he's writing notes to us in the clouds. He's with and among his people. With, into, and in, believing into the one sent, before, upon, by. That's Yahweh's Spirit holy, that is his laws, statutes, and judgments. Yalkanon 6:63, I believe it is. Upon, by, toward, and beside. He's beside us today, and within us. And that's all the meanings of that word. Becoming a servant. By the way, if you want to, if we're needing help in the cafeteria on these 2 days, these 2 last days, today's a Sabbath day, tomorrow's a weekly Sabbath. So if you can, let's continue the feast through tomorrow evening at sunset. I've got a lot of great things for tomorrow, including the great community meal. If you can volunteer, if you women, any of you women can volunteer in the cafeteria, we'll go to the cafeteria itself and tell them what hour or hours you can work and what day you prefer to work. And they'll take your name and book you in to do a certain job. Becoming servants, well, that's Yahweh's way, and it's all volunteer. He doesn't force anyone. He wants a kingdom that will absolutely voluntarily uphold His house, keep His laws, live by them strictly, all volunteer. He doesn't force you at all. The world forces. That's what they've tried. Now for 6,000 years, and of course it's failed for 6,000 years, and now we're facing a time when each force is equaled out. So the force we have in the nuclear bomb is made up by the force of many nations in the East, and of course they're the so-called evil powers that are forming. That's what the Pope said. We regret these evil powers that are forming, that is, forming against his method of force. I don't know if you read what he said about his Easter cross, but he said this is the tree of life. Now, anyone in his right mind would know that Constantine was given a sword, and of course the cross has got the handle sticking up where you lay your hand. You put your hand on it, on that handle, and you use it for killing, and that's what it's always been used for. Yeshua, he wasn't sacrificed on a cross anyway. He was sacrificed on a stake. We have proof of that. Both hands were nailed above his head. And of course, that's the way it was with everyone who was placed on a post or stake to die. And that's the way he died. That cross is an institution of Satan. It represents a sword. And of course, the blade is down. And the vision that Constantine saw in the clouds and the sun that he said he saw was this sword. And that's what the Scripture calls it. And he went forth conquering and to conquer by force. The same system that the Nimrod system taught in Genesis, the 10th chapter. Well, here, becoming a servant and doing it voluntarily, that's what Yahweh wants in His kingdom, and that's what Yeshua set the perfect example of. Becoming one with Yahweh, and that is Yahweh Himself. We're going to see that more clearly in this sermon. Hopefully I can get to all of it. Serving those who will inherit. We're serving one another. And think of this, when you're hating your enemies, one day you're going to have your enemies working side by side with you, because many of those enemies are going to convert. That's the reason Yeshua said, love your enemies. Don't hate your enemies. If you think about it in this manner, you know, you're very blessed to be called into the house of Yahweh. Very blessed. In fact, that's right. And we, in this last day's time now, we are the greatest. We're going to inherit the greatest positions ever. It all came down to this time period, and it's dependent on Yahweh bringing this remnant through and showing that He can pull us out of the deepest traps of Satan. And but the enemies, the so-called enemies that hate us now, this won't continue, and they're going to be given, their minds are going to be open, they're going to be given understanding, and then they will become our servants. We will serve them, they will serve us. And that's what the kingdom of Yahweh is going to be made up of, servants serving each other, serving the whole universe. That will bring peace. Well, right now, we're the enemies. They're suffering greatly, really suffering. And the wars, if you could put yourself in one of those situations, in one of those towns that where the rioting is going on, the cannon fire is going on, people being blown to bits, men, women, and children, those people are an example of Satan's face, of course. That's her face shining upon the whole world right now. But they're the ones that's going to suffer greatly here. We've gone through some trials, yes, but to see if we were strong enough to stay. But we're still here. We didn't get our heads blown off. And those people that are suffering, and that's the reason Yeshua said, you're going to have to love your enemies. You can't hate them like the world does. You know, they shot a gun at me, well, I'll shoot one back. They sunk my ship, I'll sink two of theirs. And of course, the build up the force. And as Mitt Romney said, I can't believe this would come out of the mouth of somebody. Anyway, he said, sure, that's enough cause for a nuclear war. We've got to prove that we're stronger than they are. Well, what does it prove so far? It's proved that our enemies have to build bigger weapons. That's all it's ever proven. And now our enemies have the same size weapons as ours, and they're teamed up and wanting to come against the United States, which is still the strongest nation, single nation. But you combined all of those nations over there that's got nuclear bombs, there's no winners at all in this last war that's coming, except you. You're the winners. And the only reason you're a winner is because Yahweh has pulled you out of this world and given you a special opportunity, a very special opportunity. You should be thanking Yahweh every day before you go to work, serving your brothers and sisters. I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning, and I was praising Yahweh for you. And such a beautiful group of righteousness. And no one forcing you to do it. You're doing it voluntarily and saying, I'm going to be a part of this forever. Praise Yahweh. Well, of course, that's the kingdom that Yeshua said to seek first. Matthew 6:23, he said, seek the kingdom of Yahweh first and its righteousness, Yahweh's righteousness. Then he set you an example of what righteousness is truly like when it's kept perfectly like he did. Now, he loved his enemies. He would turn the other cheek, and did. In fact, they butchered him. They killed him, still doing it with this sword they call a cross, that the Pope is so proud of, calling it the tree of life. It's always been nothing but the tree of death. And now they're saying they want 4/5 of the earth's population wiped out, and so the rest of the population can live in peace. Start building bigger weapons and control by force. Of course, that's what they have in mind, controlling the food, everything. A certain elite group of people, elite because they've made themselves elite, proud bastards is what Yahweh calls them, what Yeshua calls them. Yes, and that's what got it. Same pride that Satan is carrying to her grave also. Well, we have a great opportunity right now, and it's overcoming. Those who overcome. Turn to that scripture and read it. Now this is the Savior in Revelations 3, and he's speaking in this time period of the group of brotherly love, and he showed us exactly what love is. Love is not saying, "Be thou warmed and filled." Love is finding a way to warm and fill that person that needs it. Praise Yahweh. But it's not in words only. It's nothing hypocritical about it. I mean, it's an act of kindness that's got to be established in the heart by practice, which he did. Yeshua practiced the laws of Yahweh, and that's the reason the apostle Yochanan said, "Don't be deceived. He who practices righteousness is righteous." And of course, this is what Yeshua, he was taught righteousness, and then he went about practicing righteousness for his years up until they killed him, until they hung him on the stake and killed him. Well, here now in Revelations, the Savior is speaking of this time period where the love is proven stronger, and it's come down to Revelations 3. It's come down to the time period when Satan's temptations and pulls are the strongest, fears and all are the strongest, and Yeshua said, "Believe without seeing." And then he told you the hell you're going to have to go through to convince him of that. Well, we went through it, and he says, "I know your works," here in this chapter. And verse 12 says, he who overcomes the world and all of its pulls, which is many, is coming at you from everywhere now. And of course, the way of Yahweh is put in the minds of the people to the point to where it all looks sick. And every time someone does something, like now they're accusing the pilot that went crazy on the plane, they're accusing him of reading his Bible. Well, see, that's Satan's way. When Satan says, "Has Yahweh said these things?" she is using the same propaganda with Eve as is displayed on the world today. Then you have the breeding program that's brought the genes down to us, the evil genes down to us that we've all had to cope with. But we can overcome them, and we're overcoming daily. And Yeshua says he knows it. He's well aware of what is going on in your mind and heart here. And he says, to those who overcome, I will make a pillar in the house of my Father, and he will never go out of it. He will hold that position. Yes, that's something that will never be taken away from you because you lived it. It's the history of you. Your history, which is a style. It's a style. It shows your style, your character, your attributes, and that is yours. It's a name that no one else truly knows except you yourself because you experienced it. So that is the way it's said in another place. I give them a new name that only they will know. Well, the way you would know it, of course, is that you lived it, you know what you had to overcome, and you set your heart to do so. You overcame it. And then you're a pillar from that time on throughout all eternity as someone can rely on. Now, that's what the word means. And we're in a position right now to be this pillar. The prophets and apostles were the foundation. And of course, we rely upon them. their words. 100% we do. And upon Yeshua's words. That's the reason we're here in this house today, is because we rely on them. Yeshua said you're a fool if you don't believe all that the prophets have spoken. Well, we believe all that the prophets have spoken. That's the reason the house of Yahweh was established in these last days. The prophet said, in the last days I will establish my house. And he did in the last days. That's the reason we know it's the last days also. One of the reasons. But he says, to him that overcomes, and of course he's talking about overcoming this world as he himself did, overcoming. In this generation right here that we're living in, that is hard to do, and it's hard to convince anyone to come out of the world and start living by the words of Yahweh. Even though they can see, I don't know, I hope you saw that, the news clips that was given and how sick this world is and what it's eating and drinking. Yahweh actually prophesied that. He said they would be doing that. While you are fed with a wholesome meal, like the one Yahweh invented, like the one Yahweh created, he said they'll be drinking their own urine. Well, of course, they're doing that here in Texas right now, and not only are they drinking their own urine, in that urine is drugs. It's filled with drugs, and these are facts, scientific facts that's been published. If you want to go on the internet and find them, there's plenty of them. They're in the lake waters and so forth, but you're taking diabetes drugs, whether you know it, drinking it. Cancer drugs, you're taking those too. It's all in their water, as prophesied. That should be enough to show you that Yahweh knew what he was talking about when he made that prophecy and said it would be in our time period. But Satan has the whole world trained to fight against Yahweh's righteousness. We see that in Revelations 12 here. It calls it deception, but Revelations 12 and verse 9, Yahweh shows that Satan has the whole world deceived. The whole world was deceived up until Yahweh started bringing a remnant out of this world and teaching them the truth, teaching them the difference in the clean and the unclean, righteousness and unrighteousness. They do err, as the prophet said. No, the word is not err. Err is spelled A-I-R. If you are a reader, you will pronounce the word reader. The word is err. It means to go astray. I don't care how the professor say you should pronounce ER, they're liars. You can't get the sound of air out of ER. It's I'm glad that somebody's noticing that besides us Okies. Turn over to Psalms 119. Psalms 119. And let's look at verse 21 here. It's actually better in the King James Version because they use the right word here, but we used what the word actually means. But don't get your mind on that too much, on my pronunciation. Pronounce, that's wrong. Everybody does it. They say pronounce. It's actually pronounce. If you'd have come from Oklahoma, you'd know that. It was pronounce in Oklahoma. But you can't get pronounce out of those letters. But we got pronounce out of them, and anyone with the right mind would know that it's pronounce and not pronounce. Well, but don't get your mind on that. Get it off of that now and go to verse 21. You rebuke, that is punish, the proud. Okies had nothing to be proud of. It was all taken away, blown away with the wind and the dust. And I'm glad I was raised in that manner. I can see today that proud people, fall. And that's what the world is right now. They've set themselves up as gods or lords. They say that the lords of ACU run Abelin. And they call themselves the Lords of Abelin, the Lords of Abelin Christian University. And of course, they're just the rabbis. Rabbis are lords. That's where the word comes from, rabbi. And when they died, they were deified and they started worshiping those lords. And that's how it comes down to the fact that they're all worshiping Lord today. There got to be so many lords, there wasn't days for them, so they made an All Lord's Day. And that's what they're worshiping today. One Lord, but it applies to all of the dead rabbis who's ever died. And that's what they're worshiping. Well, Yahweh punishes the proud. That is, the way He punishes is, He drove them out from His face, as He did Adam and Eve. So they can't partake of the tree of life. Now, if you just think about what He had to put His creation through here, starting with Adam and Eve, He drove them out from His face, and of course Cain, he said, "My punishment is more than I can bear." I wouldn't want to go that route. I would rather die than to live like this world is living. You see the suffering that's going on. I don't see how anyone can be comfortable. You know, we're told to rejoice at the feast. And we're rejoicing because we're looking for the days when we can help those people that's too blind to see what's causing this today. They're not truly our enemies. Satan is our enemy. Satan is leading them. They're not guilty of any of this. The people who are charged with killing these people, killing 5, 10, 15, 20, shooting them, molesting in all sorts of ways, was no more guilty than Noah. And when they were brought to Yeshua, if the whole world was brought to Yeshua today, they would be like Stephen said. Remember him in Acts? When they were stoning him, you need to get to that point in your mind. Brace yourself. You may be able to actually accomplish that. That would be something. Look at Stephen. He's going to be talked about. That was his style. His style was righteousness in the face of what the world would call your enemies. Well, those people, their enemies, actually brought it about where he could actually live up to this style, and now it's written on him permanently throughout all eternity. Yes. What's being written on you is overcoming this world. This is hard to do. It's not an easy thing, especially when we see what Yeshua tells us to stand up to. Well, Stephen, while they were stoning him, raised up his hands to Yahweh and said, "Don't hold this against them." What would the people do today? Draw a different weapon, or two weapons, and fight back, being the same as what he's calling the enemy, being as evil as the enemy. And that's what brings the war and the fighting. As the same apostle Jacob said. Well, here in 119, in verse 21, he says, you rebuke, that is, you allow them to suffer. You allow the proud to suffer. Those accused who have strayed. That word stray there means err. They erred. From your laws. From your laws. Well, be turning over to 118. That's verse 118. That's what the world has done today, Yahweh says. In 118, he says, you reject all those who stray. We put it stray, and that's what the word means. They go astray. It means a lot more than that, though. But it also means to stray, but it means to deceive, to be a deceiver. Did you get that last part? A deceiver. Deceive. And there's enough said on that subject. Did you get that? There's. Well, who were these fools that made up these rules? You reject all those who stray or err from your statutes, for their deceit. That's what it means. Deceit is falsehood that they take to all the world, Yahweh said. They took this profaneness. Look on over to Isaiah 24. They took this profaneness, Jeremiah 23 says, to all the world. Speaking, of course, of the 12 tribes that Yahweh dealt with and loves. Yes, He loves those people. And as one of the apostles said, even though they turned against Yahweh's laws at the time, does that mean they can't be saved? No, it doesn't. They haven't erred to the point to where, that is, most of them haven't, erred to the point to where we can't resurrect them and then open their minds to understanding. You'll have that energy one day to bring that about. Yes, you're going to be like Yahweh. This is the greatest opportunity ever offered to mankind. We're the last that's going to be the first. We'll be pillars. Pillars, yes. Pillars in this generation. Speaking of this remnant, we're going to be pillars throughout all eternity. If you will just set your mind and heart to do it and become like Yeshua and, of course, Noah. Well, here he's showing, you just read it in Psalms 119, verse 18. Yahweh is allowing this to come upon all the earth. He allows them to err, to go astray, to deceive. And here you see the end results of it. The earth mourns, and it fades away. The world mourns and fades away. And the haughty people, that is the proud that you saw in verse 19 of Psalms 119. The proud, the haughty people who want to rule over others and force them into compliance to their laws. Their laws, no matter how just or unjust they are, they set up organizations to force them into compliance with their laws. Why? Why do they not want a person or a group of people to be independent? The Galileans were independent. They came out of the world. They wouldn't be a part of it. Solomon actually gave it to one king who gave it back to him, said he didn't want it. Now that's how much they were rejected, because they didn't want to fall for their tricks of changing the Hebrew language. Yahweh said that He divided the nations by allowing them to change their language. This is what they did. This is why I'm harping on the fools that made up the rules. He allowed them to change the language. You remember when they saw Abraham, what did they say? There goes Abraham. There's Abraham, the Hebrew. Why did they call him Hebrew? Because he spoke the Hebrew language. Without vowel points? Yes. Yes. He called it like it was. Without vowel points, without changing it. Well, the Galileans went along with him. They refused to do this. That is, a certain group of Galileans. And they would not change it, so they called them, as they did the disciples, unlearned and ignorant men. Unlearned and ignorant. And they were a group of people that took care of themselves. They actually worked and served one another, did a fine job of it too, raised their children to keep the laws of Yahweh, the feast of Yahweh, at the house of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Now that's the change that took place. And of course, when we trace the words back now, when we trace these sayings that Yahweh gave us, that the apostles and prophets gave us under inspiration, and we trace it back to the original Hebrew language without vowel points, without being changed, then there's where we see, well, hey, that's the reason it doesn't fit in now the way it was translated. This way, it fits all the rest of the scriptures in the holy book of Yahweh. Well, here now we see that the earth is mourning. The earth also is defiled, and that's the reason it's mourning, under the inhabitants, or by the inhabitants of it, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. Because of this, the curse has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth is soon to be burned, and few men left. About 2 billion Yahweh shows. They're wanting to get it down to 1 million, but the Yahweh shows there's going to be about 2 billion left when the quartet finally repents. And I'm not criticizing the politicians in any way. I'm just telling you what is going to take place, what prophecy shows is going to take place. Well, the people are defiled, the earth is defiled in this time period when we have nuclear fusion that can burn the earth and few men left, and we have babies born with brain tumors. Babies. I don't know if you've watched the news here lately, but there's a bunch of it on the news. Surgeons at Children's Memorial Hospital, while removing fluid from a 4-day-old baby's brain, discovered a large mass. Well, it was tumor, of course. The baby suffers from an especially aggressive form of brain tumor, a high-grade glaucoma, most often diagnosed in adults, but now it's in the children, the doctor said, being born with it. The cancer, whose causes are unknown, I think they're lying when they say that they don't know what's causing this, because I've read many articles that shows that what's causing this is STDs. STDs is what causes the filth of the earth. STDs is what causes the air, not the but the air, A-I-R, and they call that gases, and I don't know if they use the word gases to deceive, but they should know that yes, it is gases. You could classify it as gases, but it's different. It's like H2O. H2O, if you mix the two together in a torch, you got a great explosion, and you got fire that can melt metal. Well, why doesn't it do the same thing when you mix it and call it water, like Yahweh did? Did you ever think about it? We can harness these microorganisms to do certain things for us, like making cheese. We can harness the microorganisms to get in there in milk and turn that to the greatest taste in cheese. There is, yes. The way Yahweh made the H2O, it's alive, it's hungry, it's well, and it's very hungry, and it starts eating. It's eating continually. It's alive. It doesn't burn. But you can change that and put H2O in 2 different bottles, harness it, put a torch in front of it and start letting it out, put a fire in front of it, and it goes into a hot flame of fire. Now think of this with the universe. The universe, yes, it's gas, but it's controlled gas that is alive and well and working for mankind. It's called the firmament. That's what we should be calling it. and referring where it would actually open up a cell to Genesis and show you why it's here and what it's doing. If that were taught to the children from childhood, as Yeshua was taught by righteous parents who kept the laws in Galilee, then you could bring forth another Yeshua. Yes, and we're going to, many of them. NASA says that we got trillions of planets out there. To me, I think, oh, man, what a job we've got. You know, we got a tremendous job. We need help, people. But today, Satan is striking the children. I'm hoping and praying that Yahweh has protected His people in the breeding program, which I believe He has, to the point to where we don't have that here in our children. But brethren, yes, but brethren, the world is suffering from this big time. And this brain tumor that they used to find it in adults. Of course, that doesn't mean it wasn't being transferred to the fourth generation, the third and fourth generation, even back then, but they're just now discovering it. And of course, they know now that the children are being born with it. They know that they call it genetics. Well, what does genetics mean? It means the fool that made up these rules to get away from Yahweh's plain laws and statutes, and started deceiving the world and following ways that was not righteous, and creating in their bodies the defilement that Isaiah speaks of, creating in their bodies that Yahweh said, if you do these things, the children are going to be suffering too, because you that did it can pass it on to even the third and fourth generation. Well, even the second generation now is born with it, and it affects his mind somewhat. The third generation is more so, and the fourth generation, if it keeps multiplying from one generation to the other, then you see the effect of it in this time period when the STDs are mixed with other bacteria. Yesterday evening, on the news, they had running at the bottom of the screen, all the chicken in the stores, in the grocery stores, is contaminated with E. coli. Now, when we printed that article out, it said 48% of it. Oh, well, that makes it better. Wow, I got a 50% chance here, 52% chance that I won't get this and kill myself with it. And then we have the FDA that argues with them and says, well, that E. coli bacteria is really not harmful. You know, just cook it cook it like you do bacon, I guess, and kill all the worms. Make sure you kill all the worms in it. And the group that's fighting this, and there are many people that's wanting to clean up the food supply. You know, they're like us. They're saying we need to eat healthy to be healthy. And that's what Yahweh said. Praise Yahweh. Well, the FDA is arguing with them, but they're not giving in. They're saying, you know, these fools that made up these rules ought to know that other bacteria, even besides E. coli. If you find E. coli, you're going to find other bacteria even stronger than E. coli. And yes, it will cause tumor in the brain and a few other things, or many other things, to take place, not only in you, but your children. Well, this is what we're facing here today. This is what the people that are fighting against us right now, that we would consider our enemies. You really need to start feeling sorry for them and pray and start praying for them and praying soon that Yahweh will Yahweh's kingdom will take over And then you will have the power to start resurrecting these people and putting them on the right tracks. They'll be judged for 100 years after you resurrect them. If they still persist in sin, they will die and never live again, Yahweh shows. Only those that will voluntarily live as Yeshua lived will inherit eternal life, which is not the cross of death, the cross of killing swords. They will learn war no more, Yahweh said, in that same, in chapter 2 of Isaiah. Well, it says, now the doctor said, the cancer whose causes are unknown had already engulfed most of the right hemisphere of Matthew's brain. Children nationally now are born with this usually fatal condition each year now. Yes, each year, nationally. That's one article to prove Isaiah 24, 1 through 6. It proves that it's here in the last days and the nuclear burning is going to take place. Everything that's imagined in their heart, they're going to be able to fulfill, Yahweh says. Childhood cancer statistics. Each year in the U.S., there are approximately 12,400 children now being discovered between the ages of birth to 19 years old. From birth to 19 years old, it's being discovered. They will develop cancer before their 20th birthday, it says. In 1998, about 2,500 died of cancer, thus making cancer the most common cause of death by disease for children and adolescents in America. Cancer now is the number one cause of disease-related death in children. This is the article on 48% of the chicken bought in stores has E. coli bacteria. Well, Yeshua, our high priest. That's what this is about, and that's what is going to change this whole thing. Yahweh's lamb. In Genesis, you don't have to turn there. I'm just going to fastly go through this right quickly. I've already brought it on Yeshua's memorial. But remember this because I want to continue on it tomorrow morning. But Genesis 22:8 says Yahweh will provide himself with a lamb, provide for himself a lamb. He did. In Yochanan 1:29 it says, behold the Lamb of Yahweh. That was the lamb that Yahweh provided for us. In Acts in 32 AD, Acts 8:32 through 33, I want to turn to that because there's some things there I want you to notice. That is Acts 8. You need to start watching for in your studies. I said here a while back that if the Savior appeared right quick in front of you, it'd probably scare you to death. And of course, you need to know and be aware and of all the things that have to take place. And I want the young priest here to remember what I said the other night when we was waiting on being sprinkled, and I had a few minutes to speak. You remember that? All of you? Okay. Praise Yahweh. Well, notice now 8 and verse 32 of this of Acts, chapter 32. The place in the Scriptures which he read was this: he was led as a lamb to the slaughter. Speaking of Yeshua now, and the prophecy in Isaiah. Speaking of Yeshua and the prophecy, he was prophesied to be led as a lamb to the slaughter. He was Yahweh's lamb prophesied in Genesis 22, verse 8. So he was prophesied here to be led as a lamb to the slaughter. That was the Savior, the righteous Savior. Do you get this now? He lived a perfectly righteous life, even loving his enemies and willing to die for those people. They would have no salvation if Yahweh hadn't have brought Yeshua up to live a sinless life to pay for their sins, because sin, the wages of sin, is death. Now, when you sin, you give away the only life you got. But Yeshua, he didn't sin. So he was able to die and pay for our sins. Understand? He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. In the humiliation, his judgment was taken away. You get that? His judgment. Yahweh's judgment was taken away. They had no right to do what they did. Not by Yahweh's laws. Let the man without sin, the high priest without sin, which Yahweh gave this law to Moshe, and the high priest had to pronounce it on a death sentence. He had to pronounce this himself, and he had to be without sin in order to do it. And who will declare his generation? For his life is taken from the earth. The Amplified Bible puts it better and more understandable. In his humiliation, he was taken away by distressing and oppressive judgment. That's what you see in the world today. Forceful judgment that sometimes is even without reason. It's just so unreasonable that you can hardly believe, and the judges have no set rules to go by. They just make up their own laws as they go. And justice was denied him, that is, the justice of Yahweh's laws that was supposed to be governing the 12 tribes. It was denied him. In fact, they said, I find no fault with him, but kill him anyway. Now, this was their attitude. No, I can't find him guilty, but go ahead and stick him in prison anyway. Let him die there. Stick him in prison. Let him die there. Justice, Yahweh's justice, is taken away from him. Justice was denied him, caused to cease. The justice was caused to cease. Well, now this attitude right here, if you think about it, this has come down to our world today. And when America was building, when they were establishing America and establishing justice, trying to establish justice here, their own laws to guide them, there were so many people here that had suffered from these people's hands in Europe, the Catholic Church, and they were the majority here. They were running for their lives, and they said, we don't want any more of that kind of justice. So they made constitutional rights. Well, now they're seeking out people with independence who want to be independent from society. They're seeking them out, those who preach constitutional rights. And they're passing laws to be able to go into their homes. Well, with that, one of the laws that protected freedom of speech also protected a man in his own house. And I remember in the police department, when I went through that school, that academy, they were teaching this very thing. They were saying, you know, a person is supposed to be safe and secure in their own homes. Well, see, this system, the Nimrod system, if they don't like something, Then they get a group together and they pass a law to change that situation. So if a person is protected and they want to get that person, then they could merely pass a law and make that law binding. Then they can send the police out to enforce the law. Force, enforce, or force. That's what Yeshua said we will not have in Yahweh's kingdom. Well, all of this was taken away from him. Who can describe or relate in full the wickedness of his contemporaries? Well, you see it today. They say that generation. You see the same thing going on day after day after day. Killing and imprisoning without any justice. And years later, after a man stays in prison for many, many years, then they find out that he was innocent. And they release him. And one man, if you heard, he said all of his kinfolks had died. He had no place to go. He said, I may as well just stay here. Well, this is the justice that was passed down to us. If they don't like their blessings, let them be taken from them. The laws of Yahweh, the justice, the statutes and judgments of Yahweh was a tremendous blessing that they let go of. And the prophecy said, if they don't appreciate this blessing that you're giving them, let it be taken from them. Well, they said that generation. Well, from that generation, they had this same thing come to all nations around them. And the United States, when it was being formed, our forefathers said, we don't want this same mess that's in Europe. So they started passing, the constitutional right was written up, and freedom of speech and so forth, and we had a lot of rights. Well, now those rights are being taken away like it was in Europe by the same Nimrod system of force. And they're saying, we can't go into a home and search it, so let's pass some laws so we can go into a home and search it. This is the justice that was taken away from Yeshua, now pronounced on all nations, including America. For his life is taken from the earth, and a bloody death inflicted upon him. And that was all prophesied in Isaiah 53. I don't see how anyone can read these scriptures and see the fulfilled prophecy. No man on earth can prophesy and bring it to pass. Yahweh alone can foretell the future, as Isaiah says. In the morning, don't miss in the morning. Don't miss this afternoon either. It's really great. And then in the morning, we're going to continue this and show Yeshua's government that you have the opportunity to be a part of. You're almost to the finishing line, running this race. That's a race. The only race of people is the race they run to get to the kingdom. They're all equal in Yahweh's eyes, everyone, and given the same opportunity, except Yahweh has chosen a special group, not because of your righteousness. He took you out of the worst sins of the world. You were probably the worst there was, or would have been if he hadn't pulled you out. And he took you out and said, this is yours if you want to partake of it. But if you refuse these blessings, they will be taken away from you as they were from Yeshua, who paid for that wickedness of mankind. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next lady. I love you, brothers and sisters.